Don't come to the wedding. It's better if you just stay away. That's what my brother whispered to me in the kitchen that night. His words cut through the hum of the refrigerator like a knife pressed against skin. He didn't even look at me when he said it, just kept staring at the floor, clenching and unclenching his jaw like he was holding something back. My name is Claire Monroe. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? Because that's exactly how it felt in that moment. My own brother, the one who once carried me on his shoulders through county fairs, the one who shared midnight pizzas with me when our parents fought, was now shutting me out of the biggest day of his life. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking. What do you mean, don't come? I'm your only sister, James. Of course I'm coming. But his eyes, cold, heavy, clouded with something I couldn't read, snapped up to mine. No. I'm serious, Claire. It's for the best. For the best. Those words ricocheted inside me like broken glass. I wanted to scream, demand an explanation, shake the truth out of him. But instead I just stood there staring at my brother. My brother who looked at me like I was poison, like I was a risk he couldn't afford. And that's when the anger lit in my chest like gasoline. Because if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that people hide ugly things when they tell you to stay away. That night, as he walked past me without another word, I made myself a silent promise. I will find out what you're hiding, James. I didn't know yet that the truth waiting for me would rip my heart open. That following him in secret would lead me into a darkness I could never unsee. But betrayal has a way of planting seeds. And that night mine was already sprouting roots. The next morning, James acted like nothing had happened. He poured coffee, scrolled through his phone, even asked me if I needed gas money like the old protective brother he used to be. But his eyes betrayed him. Every time his phone buzzed, he tilted it away from me. Every time I tried to bring up the wedding, he changed the subject so fast it was almost clumsy. That's when I decided, if he wouldn't let me in, I'd force my way in. The following Friday, I waited until I saw him leave the house in his charcoal gray jacket. He didn't know I had the day off work. He didn't know I saw him slip his car keys into his hand and check his reflection twice in the window before getting in. He didn't know I was watching. My heart thundered as I slid into my own car, careful to stay 3 lengths behind him. The streets blurred past, elm, then cedar, then the bridge that led out of town. I kept thinking, where are you taking her? Why can't I meet her? He finally pulled into a quiet cafe on the edge of the city. One of those hidden places where secrets can breathe without being noticed. I parked down the block and slipped inside minutes later. The air smelled of roasted beans and warm bread. Couples whispered in corner booths, their voices soft, their laughter private. And then I saw him. James was seated near the window, his posture tense. Across from him sat a woman. She had a beauty that demanded silence, dark hair falling in waves, skin glowing in the golden light of late morning. Her hand reached across the table, brushing his. But it wasn't their intimacy that made my stomach clench. It was her face. Even from across the cafe, recognition stabbed me like ice. My breath faltered. My vision blurred. I knew that face, too well, too deeply, too painfully. I froze, gripping the back of a chair to steady myself. Because the woman sitting across from my brother, the woman he was planning to marry, was not a stranger at all. She was someone from my past. Someone I had buried. Someone who once tore my life apart so completely that I had sworn I would never forgive her. And now she was smiling at my brother as if he was her salvation. I nearly called his name right then, nearly stormed over and ripped the veil off her carefully constructed lie. But I didn't. Because betrayal has a rhythm, and if you move too early you miss the crescendo. So I slipped out of the cafe quietly, my pulse pounding in my ears. And as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles burned, I whispered to myself, if he loves her, if he chooses her over me, then he will know what betrayal really feels like. Her name is Emily Carter. Even saying it now leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. Because Emily wasn't just some random woman from James's past. She was my past. My ruin. Back in college, Emily had been my best friend, or at least that's what I thought. We were inseparable. Late-night drives with the windows down, study sessions that turned into laughter-filled sleepovers, secrets whispered in the dark. And then came the man. Ethan. My first love. My first everything. The boy who swore he'd build a life with me. I trusted Emily with all of it. Every detail of our relationship, every fight, every kiss. She listened, she nodded, she told me she was happy for me. Until the night I found them together. I can still see it, Ethan's shirt half unbuttoned, Emily's lipstick smeared across his mouth, her eyes locking with mine over his shoulder. No shame, no apology. Just a cold, satisfied smirk. That night shattered me. Ethan walked away. Emily pretended she did nothing wrong. And I was left crawling through the broken glass of my own trust. I never spoke to her again. I swore I never would. Till now. And now she was here, across the cafe table from my brother, her hand brushing his like she owned him. Like she had already won. When I drove home that day my head was spinning. My knuckles were white on the wheel. My chest was heavy with a truth I wasn't ready to tell James. How could I? How could I look my brother in the eye and say, the woman you're about to marry is the same woman who destroyed me? Would he even believe me? Or would he see me as jealous, bitter, unable to move on from a betrayal years ago? Well, I couldn't just tell him. I needed proof. I needed to show him who she really was. The days that followed blurred into obsession. I started shadowing Emily whenever I could. I knew her routines now. The yoga studio on 8th Street, the bakery she liked downtown, the way she lingered outside jewelry stores like she was already planning her next conquest. But what burned me most was the act she put on with James. Sweet, gentle, attentive. The perfect fiancée. She laughed at his dumb jokes, leaned into his shoulder like she belonged there, painted herself into the canvas of his life so seamlessly that anyone watching would believe she was his soulmate. Anyone but me. Because I knew the real Emily. The Emily who could smile into your face while sharpening the knife for your back. The Emily who had no loyalty, no limits, no conscience. And I realized then she hadn't changed. She'd only gotten better at hiding. I sat in my car one night outside their apartment watching the light in their window flicker as they moved inside, laughing, pouring wine. And I whispered into the silence of the night, "You took Ethan from me. But you will not take James." That was the moment I stopped being the sister on the outside. That was the moment I decided to become the storm. The first seed of doubt had to be small. Almost invisible. Something James wouldn't recognize as suspicion until it had already rooted itself deep inside him. So one night while we were eating takeout in the living room I asked casually, "Hey, what does Emily do for work again?" James didn't even look up from his carton of lo mein. "Marketing." "Why? Marketing where?" I pressed, twirling noodles around my fork. He hesitated. "Just a beat. Some firm downtown." I nodded like I believed him. But I didn't. Because in all my hours of trailing Emily, I'd never once seen her walk into an office. Never once seen her carrying a laptop or a briefcase. What I had seen was her slipping into expensive boutiques, coming out with bags she paid for in cash. "Sounds good," I murmured, letting the silence do the work. James shifted in his seat, suddenly restless. That was all I needed. The second seed was more direct. A week later I accidentally left an old photo album open on the counter when James came home. Pages from my college years. Pictures of me and Emily, arms wrapped around each other, smiling like sisters. James stopped in his tracks. "Wait. You know Emily?" I looked up with feigned surprise. "Oh, yeah. We used to be friends." He frowned. "Why didn't you say anything?" I shrugged, shutting the album a little too quickly. "It's complicated." Then I walked away before he could ask more. I could feel his suspicion growing, like static in the air before a storm. But suspicion wasn't enough. I needed him to see her, to catch even a glimpse of the woman she really was. So the third seed, that one was dangerous. I followed Emily again, this time to a sleek hotel downtown. She walked in confidently like she'd been there before. I waited outside for almost an hour, my nerves electric, my stomach twisted. And then she appeared, her hand brushing the arm of a man who was most definitely not my brother. He was older, silver hair, tailored suit, wedding ring gleaming under the streetlights. And the way Emily looked at him, coy, calculating, familiar, made my blood boil. I lifted my phone, snapping photo after photo, my hands trembling but steady enough. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at those photos until sunrise, my mind unraveling 1,000 scenarios of how to use them, when to drop them, how to make sure James saw the truth without blaming me for destroying his illusion. Because that was the risk, wasn't it? The closer I got to exposing Emily, the more I risked James turning against me. But as I sat there in the dark, lit only by the blue glow of my screen, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If I didn't burn Emily first, she'd burn me again. And this time she'd take my brother with her. I didn't want a courtroom. I didn't want drama that let Emily practice her victim face under fluorescent lights. I wanted a quiet, surgical reveal. A single moment that would fracture whatever perfect life she'd painted for my brother. So I set the trap where she couldn't hide, inside James's phone. I made a fake email account. Nothing flashy, just a plain name that looked like a vendor. I attached the hotel photos, cropped close to show Emily's hand on the older man's arm, the ring glinting like a secret badge. In the body of the message I typed only 3 words. Thought you should know. Then I sent it carbon copied to myself. I waited with the kind of patience that used to terrify me in exams and job interviews. My whole body thrummed. When his phone buzzed across the kitchen counter that night, the sound felt like an announcement. He picked it up, squinted at the screen, and I watched the color drain from his face the way sunlight leaves a room. "Who sent that?" he asked, voice low. I could have stayed silent. I could have let the mystery gnaw at him. But silence could be styled as protection of Emily. Silence could be spun. So I stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "It's me," I said. "I found out." He looked at me like I'd thrown a stone through a stained glass window. "You what?" I told him the truth in the way you give a controlled substance. Measured, sterile, clinical. The hotel. The man. The ring. The photos I'd taken. I watched every move of his face as the story landed, watched confusion sharpen into a hurt I recognized because it mirrored my own. He stood up so fast his chair scraped. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because you asked me not to," I said. "Because you were trusting her. Because I needed proof." My voice was steady but my hands were shaking. I felt the old fracture open in my chest, the same one Emily had made when she took Ethan and left me with splinters. James sank back down like someone who'd been punched. "I need to talk to her," he said. He left me there, and for the first time in my life I hoped he would be gentle. I wanted him to confront her and come away safe. I wanted him to see and still forgive if forgiveness was what he chose. I wanted, ridiculous, selfish wish, that he would choose me afterward. A week passed in a strange limbo. Emily was careful, too careful, but everyone is careful when they sense wind before a storm. Her Instagram bloomed with engagement photos staged to perfection. She laughed with James at dinners. She saved seats for him at brunches. But underneath the practiced smile, cracks began to show. She started arriving late to their dates, her hair never as polished as before. She flinched when James called her babe in public. Once I watched her in the yoga studio wipe her eyes when no one was looking. Not pain. Not sorrow. Calculation. Damage control. And then one humid evening she came to our block. She walked up the steps to our stoop like she belonged there, like she had a right to our family's threshold. I opened the door before she could knock. "Claire," she said, soft as a closed knife. Her voice had that practiced note of contrition that was always the first layer of her performance. She pressed a small envelope into my hand. Inside, a single photograph. James and Emily, arms around each other, smiling, the exact picture she plastered online. But on the back, in hurried handwriting, she'd written, "Some truths hurt. This one will hurt less if you leave." Her eyes were bright with something that wasn't tears. It was triumph. She wanted to be the one to decide my retreat. And in that moment, standing on my own stoop with her words like cold coins in my palm, I realized the trap had been set not only for her. It had been set for me too. I had wanted to protect my brother. Instead, I had handed Emily a map of my rage. I stared at that photograph long after Emily left. My brother's smile pressed against her cheek like a promise, her handwriting on the back like a curse. "This one will hurt less if you leave." The That wasn't an option. If Emily thought she could scare me off with veiled threats and sugar-coated malice, then she had forgotten who I was. She had forgotten what she'd already done to me, and what kind of woman that betrayal had made me become. I tucked the photo away in my dresser. A reminder. A warning. A declaration of war. The very next day I planted my strike. James came home exhausted, his tie loosened, his shoulders weighed down with the burden of someone trying to hold two versions of the truth at once. He didn't know I'd been waiting for him, that I'd staged the living room like a set. Lamp lit, wine poured, the photo album from college open again. But this time it wasn't a casual accident. Sit, I told him. He sank onto the couch, brows furrowed. Claire, I don't have the energy. You don't need energy, I said softly. You need clarity. I slid the album toward him. My finger tapped against a picture of me and Emily, cheek to cheek, arms slung around each other at a fraternity party. My eyes were bright, hers sharper, hungrier. That girl you're planning to marry, I whispered, once destroyed my life. She stole Ethan from me, lied to me for months, then smiled while I drowned in the wreckage. James's throat worked, swallowing something hard. People change, Claire. Do they? I leaned closer. Or do they just learn to hide better? The silence stretched like wire between us. Then I dropped my final card. The photos. I placed them in his lap. Emily with the silver-haired man, her hand draped across his arm, her eyes alight with that same hunger I remembered from years ago. James flinched as if the paper burned him. Where did you? Do you really want me to answer that? I cut in. Or do you already know the truth? He didn't speak. He couldn't. The evidence was louder than either of us. But what struck me hardest was not his silence. It was the way his hands trembled. James, my strong, steady brother who once held me through nights I cried myself hollow after Emily's first betrayal, was now breaking in the exact same way. And I hated her for it. The following weekend the cracks widened. I watched them at Sunday dinner with our parents. Emily smiled and charmed, but her eyes kept flicking toward James, searching for warmth, finding only frost. His replies were shorter. His laughter forced. When dessert came, Emily reached for his hand. He pulled it away without even realizing. And in that split-second recoil I knew I had won the first battle. But wars aren't won in single strikes. Emily felt the shift too. I saw it in her eyes as she caught me watching her across the table. Her smile faltered for half a breath, her mask slipping. And behind that mask I saw the woman I'd always known. Ruthless, cornered, dangerous. It didn't take Emily long to retaliate. 2 days after that dinner, James stormed into my room without knocking. His face was thunder. What the hell did you say to her? I blinked, thrown by the fury in his voice. What are you talking about? She told me you cornered her. That you threatened her. That you said you'd ruin her if she didn't walk away. His voice cracked. Claire, please tell me that's not true. My chest burned with rage. Emily's move was clear. Poison the well. Make me the villain before the truth could settle. I didn't threaten her, I said, my voice shaking. I showed you what she really is, James. I gave you proof. She's lying to you, just like she lied to me, just like she lied to Ethan, just like she's lying now. James raked his hands through his hair, pacing. He was unraveling right in front of me. Do you have any idea what this is doing to me? You're my sister. She's my fiancée. I feel like I'm being ripped in half. I stepped closer, tears rising hot and unwanted. Then look at the evidence. Don't look at me. Look at her. But Emily had already worked her magic. I saw it in the way his shoulders squared against me, in the way his eyes looked through me instead of at me. Doubt wasn't enough anymore. She'd injected him with her narrative and it was spreading fast. That night I found the Rayal wound she had cut. James stopped answering my texts. Stopped coming home for dinner. When I called, Emily answered his phone with a saccharine, "He's busy." She was isolating him. Taking him from me one silence at a time. And I realized with a sickening weight, I wasn't just fighting for my brother's trust anymore. I was fighting for my brother, period. So I went deeper. I dug into Emily's world the way a surgeon cuts into rot. Hotel receipts. Gym memberships under fake names. Credit card charges that didn't match her marketing job. I built a file thicker than a Bible, proof stack so high it threatened to topple. And then I found it. For the kind of truth that scorches everything it touches. The silver-haired man wasn't just some affair. His name was Richard Calloway, married, wealthy CEO of a company Emily had been circling for years. She wasn't just cheating. She was building her next ladder. James was her placeholder, her stepping stone, her insurance policy until she could cash in bigger. When I realized it, my blood went cold. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy. Emily wasn't in love with my brother. She was using him. Grooming him to believe he was unworthy without her. Setting him up to crash when she disappeared with someone richer. And when she was finished, James wouldn't just be heartbroken. He'd be destroyed. That night, I pressed my forehead against the window, the city lights smearing into stars I couldn't hold. I whispered to myself, she thinks she can rewrite the ending. But this story isn't hers anymore. Tomorrow I would end it. The wedding day dawned bright, almost cruel in its beauty. Sunlight spilled across the church steps like a blessing, while inside, flowers choked the air with sweetness that felt suffocating. I wasn't invited, but I went anyway. Not as a guest, as a storm. I wore black. No smile, no disguise. Just the weight of the file I'd built, tucked into my bag like a weapon. The pews were full, everyone glowing with that soft intoxication of love stories they believe are real. James stood at the altar, pale but composed, his hands clasped tight. When Emily appeared, draped in white, she glowed like a saint. To them she was perfection. To me she was poison dipped in sugar. The vows began. Words of forever, loyalty, devotion. Lies stitched together with ribbons. And just as Emily opened her mouth to speak her part, I stood. Don't, I said. My voice cut through the hush like glass through skin. Heads turned. Whispers flared. James's eyes widened, torn between fury and desperation. Claire. But I didn't look at him. I looked at her. Emily. My ghost. My wound. My ruin. Tell them, I said. Tell this room who you really are. She laughed. That soft, dismissive laugh she always used to win the crowd. She's jealous. Everyone knows Claire never supported us. So I opened my bag. And I dropped the file onto the altar. Receipts. Photos. Emails. Proof. Like blood spilling across white linen. Gasps rippled through the church. Someone whispered Richard Calloway's name. Someone else muttered married. Emily's mask slipped in an instant. Her face hardened, eyes narrowing to the woman I had always known was there. She lunged toward me, hissing low so only I could hear. You think this will stop me? But James had already stepped between us. His hands shook as he lifted the photos, his lips moving as if he couldn't form the words. When he finally looked at her, his face was unrecognizable, broken, betrayed, furious. You, he whispered, are everything she said you were. Emily's lips parted, searching for another lie, another mask. But there was no saving it now. Not with the truth bleeding out across the altar. Not with the congregation staring as if they'd witnessed a murder. And for the first time, Emily didn't look like the victor. She looked small. Cornered. Defeated. James turned to me then. His eyes, my brother's eyes, brimmed with pain but also with something else. Gratitude. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence was enough. Emily fled the church in white, but her dress might as well have been ash. The doors slammed behind her and with them, every illusion she'd ever spun. I stood there, my heart pounding, my body trembling but lighter somehow. Because after years of carrying her shadow, I had finally dragged it into the light. James didn't marry her that day. He didn't marry anyone. But he walked out beside me. And for the first time in years I felt like I wasn't losing him, I was getting him back. The past was still scarred. The wounds were still raw. But the cycle was broken. And Emily Carter would never touch our lives again.